You've experienced this before. You walk into someone's home and something feels different, not in an obvious way, nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress you. But everything feels in place. The counters are clear, the floors are open. There's a kind of quiet in the space that you don't usually notice until it's there. And for a second, you think, how do they live like this all the time? Not just when guests come over, not just on weekends, but constantly. And the strange part is, it doesn't look like effort. They don't look exhausted by it. They don't look like they just cleaned before you arrived. It looks like this is simply their normal state. And that's where the misunderstanding begins. Because what you're seeing is not a moment, it's a system. Most people have tried. You clean everything, you reset your space, you promise yourself this time will be different, and for a while it is. The counters stay clear, the room stays organized, there's even a sense of pride in it. But then something subtle happens. A dish stays in the sink, a jacket lands on a chair, a task gets postponed for later, and it feels harmless because it is just one thing. But your brain doesn't process it as one thing, it processes it as a signal. This is unfinished. This still needs attention. Something is not complete. And that's where everything slowly starts to shift again. So what's the real difference? Why do some people maintain a clean home without effort, while for others it feels like a constant reset cycle? Psychologically, it's not discipline, it's not motivation, and it's definitely not preference. Most of them don't even enjoy cleaning. What's different is something far less visible. Their relationship with initiation. Your brain doesn't experience your home the way you think it does. There's a concept in cognitive psychology called cognitive load. It refers to the total amount of mental effort your brain is carrying at any given moment. And here's what most people miss. Your environment is constantly feeding that load. Every object out of place, every unfinished task, every small visual inconsistency is quietly registered by your brain, not consciously, but continuously. And each one carries a message. Handle this, don't forget this is still open. Now multiply that by an entire space. And suddenly your home is not just a place you live in. It's a system of ongoing mental reminders. A pile of dishes is not just a pile of dishes, it is unresolved mental friction. A visual cue that something is incomplete, and your brain treats incompleteness as weight. That weight doesn't feel dramatic, it feels like fatigue, like mental noise you can't turn off. Now compare that to the opposite environment, a space where everything is resolved, nothing is waiting, nothing is almost done. Nothing is visually demanding attention, and something very subtle happens. Your brain stops scanning, it stops checking, it stops preparing for action. And in that moment, your nervous system downshifts, not because you decided to relax, but because there's nothing left to monitor. This is why clean environments don't just look better, they feel quieter, not externally, internally. But here's where most people misunderstand the behavior entirely. People who keep their home clean are not constantly cleaning. They are preventing accumulation. That is the real difference. Most people operate in cycles. Clutter builds, pressure increases, big cleanup, temporary relief, repeat, and each cycle reinforces a hidden belief. This is hard. So the threshold to start next time becomes even higher. People with consistently clean homes don't enter that loop because they never allow the system to escalate. They act at the level of small decisions, not big interventions. A dish gets cleaned immediately. An object gets returned immediately. A surface gets reset immediately. Not because they are strict, but because delay is more expensive than action. And this is where identity begins to matter. They don't see themselves as people who clean. They see themselves as people who don't leave things unresolved. That is a completely different internal definition, and identity always wins over effort. Always. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't negotiate it, you don't debate it, you don't wait for motivation, you just do it. Not because it is enjoyable, but because it is part of who you are. And the same shift exists here. Once maintenance becomes identity, effort disappears from the equation. Now there's another layer most people never connect: control. Very few areas of life are fully predictable. Other people, work, time, emotional states, most of it is unstable. But your environment, that's one of the few domains you can actually influence directly. And every time you restore order in your space, you send a quiet signal to your brain. I can influence my surroundings. That signal matters more than it seems, because it builds what psychology calls an internal locus of control, the belief that your actions matter. And people with that belief consistently show lower stress, higher resilience, and greater emotional stability, not because life is easier for them, but because their interpretation of life is different. Now here's something even more subtle: timing. People who maintain a clean home don't rely on later because they understand something most people ignore. Later is where accumulation begins, so they act immediately, not perfectly, not obsessively, but early. And that single shift changes everything, because small tasks delayed don't stay small, they compound. And compounding is what creates overwhelm. There's also a neurological side to this. The brain responds strongly to completion. When a task is finished, even a small one, it releases a reward signal. Not enough to notice consciously, but enough to reinforce behavior. A clean counter, a made bed, an empty sink. These are not trivial cues to your brain. They are micro evidence of control and capability, and over time, they build momentum. That's why people often say, "I feel better after cleaning," even when they didn't want to start. It's not about cleaning itself, it's about resolution. Now here's an important truth. If you've ever thought, "I'm just a messy person. I can't keep things organized. This isn't me." That feels like identity, but it is actually repetition, because identity is built from evidence, and evidence is behavior repeated over time. Every small action either reinforces your current identity or creates the foundation for a new one. Every time you put something away immediately, you are casting a vote. Every time you reset a space before leaving it, you are reinforcing a standard. And your brain is always counting, even when you are not. And eventually, something shifts. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but quietly. You stop trying to maintain order, and you just do, without internal resistance, without negotiation, without effort. And that's the moment everything changes, because at that point, cleanliness is no longer a task. It becomes your baseline, not perfect, not rigid, just stable. And that stability doesn't stay in your environment. It spreads into your thinking, your attention, your energy, your sense of control over your life. There's one more layer to this that most people never fully connect. Even when someone understands all of this, even when they agree with the psychology, something still blocks change. And it is not knowledge, it is friction, mental friction. That invisible resistance that shows up the moment you try to act differently. You see the mess. You know it would take 2 minutes. You know it would feel better afterward. But still, you delay. And in that delay, your brain begins negotiating. Later is fine. It's not that bad. I'll do it after this. I don't have the energy right now. But what is actually happening is not evaluation of the task, it is protection of your current state. Because every action that restores order requires a micro break from comfort, and the brain naturally resists switching states. That is why people do not fail at cleaning, they fail at starting. Now here is where people who maintain clean homes are different. They reduce the importance of the decision itself. There is no internal debate. The gap between noticing and doing is extremely small. A dish is seen, it is handled. A surface is dirty, it is wiped. An object is out of place, it is returned. No story, no delay, no emotional weight. And because of that, nothing ever accumulates. This is also why their environments feel different when you enter them. It is not just cleanliness, it is absence of build-up energy. There is no layer of postponed decisions embedded in the space. Nothing is silently waiting. And your nervous system feels that immediately, even if you cannot explain it. And there's another effect. Over time, this changes how effort feels. Because when you act immediately, tasks never become emotionally inflated. A small task stays small. It never becomes something you have to deal with. And that is crucial. Because most stress does not come from difficulty. It comes from accumulation. So when people say, I will do it later when I have energy, what actually happens is the opposite. Energy decreases because things are left unresolved. Unfinished environments drain cognitive resources continuously, even when you are not thinking about them directly. And this is why stable environments are not built through bursts of effort. They are built through micro-continuity, small corrections, constant resets to baseline, not climbing out of chaos, but preventing descent into it. In the end, this was never about cleanliness, it was about cognitive clarity. And people who understand that do not live in cleaner homes because they try harder. They live in cleaner homes because nothing ever gets the chance to become heavy. That is the real difference, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. If this changed the way you look at your environment, consider subscribing. Because most people don't realize this until much later. They are not overwhelmed by life itself. They are overwhelmed by what they leave unresolved. And once you start seeing that clearly, you stop fighting your environment and start understanding it.